So let's give a warm welcome to Mr. Carl Spruhan.
Thank you. Can you hear me from up here? Yes? Okay. Yeah. Sort of. Can you hear me now? Yeah. All right, I'll speak loudly. That will not be a problem. Yat e Paul Spruhan Yinshe. Beligana Nishle, obviously. Now, when they first asked me to do this talk, I felt a little strange because, Beligana Nishle. I do not have the gravitas of Dr. Platero or Dr. Russell. I have it on good information, actually, that my own wife, who was on the board of this organization, voted against this presentation. So with a ringing endorsement like that, how could I say no? But I thought about it a little bit in relation to the theme of this conference. And I thought, I can do what I can to help to empower people to think about the law and how the law affects people on the ground every day in the Navajo Nation. And so that's what I want to talk about, is the role of law on the Navajo Nation. I am an attorney. I'm sorry, I apologize in advance. I work for DOJ. I apologize again in advance. You'll see the first picture here is the front of the Department of Justice building in Window Rock, Arizona. We had a few guests that particular day. We usually get cows that wander around. This is one of the rare opportunities. We actually had sheep right in front grazing in front of our building. So I thought it was symbolic of what I want to talk about today. Now, I do not have control of the slides up in the front, so back in the day with the Puff the Magic Dragon film strips, I will be going boop or something like that to change the slides. So next slide. Now, I could give you a highly complex discussion about jurisprudence, about footnote 23 of a concurring opinion of Justice O'Connor, which would no doubt be fascinating to everyone involved, especially me. But I'm going to talk about fried chicken. This is, of course, one of the landmarks in Window Rock, Arizona, Church's Chicken, right next to Bash's and McDonald's. You may have a preference for this particular chicken. Greasy, delicious, 12 pieces for $10, how can you go wrong? But there are legal implications to this particular Church's Chicken, next slide, and this place, San Benito, New Mexico. This is the KFC. They are 1 mile apart. They serve essentially the same thing. But one thing you may not notice, unless you read your receipt very carefully, unless you look behind the register very carefully, there are two legal regulatory schemes that control the type of chicken you get, whether you are in Window Rock or San Benito. Because in Window Rock, you are on the reservation. Your taxes that you pay go to Window Rock and the Navajo Nation government. The health inspection of the fried chicken is done by the Office of Environmental Health, which is a Navajo Nation government agency, and by the Indian Health Service. The people who work there are all Navajo. But if someone fires them, they can file under the Navajo Preference and Employment Act because they cannot be disciplined without just cause as a minimum requirement under Navajo law. I like KFC better, so you might say. They have more advertising, finger-licking good. They change Colonel Sanders every 6 months to some other actor. I think it's George Costanza on Seinfeld recently. So I'm going to go to KFC in San Benito, New Mexico. Well, wait a minute. My taxes are now going to McKinley County, New Mexico, not to the Navajo Nation. The health is inspected by McKinley County. The business license is issued by McKinley County. And more importantly, all the workers, who are also all Navajo, are at-will employees, meaning they can be fired for any reason at any time, and they have no grievance rights. Now, why is that? Even though it is a mile from Church's Chicken, it is in New Mexico jurisdiction, not Navajo Jurisdiction. How did that happen? San Benito, if you don't know, is a literal border town. Next slide. This is what it looks like from a jurisdictional perspective. This is a blow-up of a Bureau of Land Management surface management map. And you can go on the BLM New Mexico website and look at any particular place in New Mexico, and they have color-coded who has surface management and therefore jurisdiction. San Benito, where KFC is located right here. This is Highway 264. The reservation boundary is right here. The state boundary is here. Window Rock, where Church's Chicken, is over here. San Benito is in the Eastern Navajo Agency in checkerboard jurisdiction. Have you ever wondered why in the shopping center in San Benito there's not one but two loan stores? They cannot locate on the Navajo Nation. Why is that? The Navajo Nation has usury laws that caps the interest rates they can charge. So they did the next best thing. They literally located right next door because they are in New Mexico jurisdiction. Next slide. So how did this happen? In 2018, why is it that way? We have to go back to 1868 appropriately for the theme of this conference. Now, I talked about in the treaty discussion on Thursday morning this particular image. Now, this is part of the council chamber mural that wraps around the Hogan. This is in the area by the exit. If you're a DOJ, you sit right below the speaker, hiding behind the pole, hope they don't ask you a question about the amendment to the question of privilege. And you daydream a lot, particularly if the wireless is out. And you look around the murals and you notice this image. What is this an image of? This is an important event in Navajo oral history, where Navajo women confronted the most famous general in U.S. history, William Tecumseh Sherman, who came to Bosque Redondo Fuerte to negotiate for the Peace Commission on behalf of the United States, and he had one motivation in mind. We are going to take them to Oklahoma. We are going to say, go to Indian Territory. Barboncito, in the official transcript, said, and I paraphrase, "You must be joking. You said this place was a nice place, and look at it." So that's not happening. But Navajo oral history has even more stories about this, including this event, where the Navajo women confronted Sherman, famous for burning down all of Georgia from Atlanta to Savannah, the most famous military figure at that time. And these Navajo women, without fear, with agency, said, that's not happening. We are going back to our lands, which is what happened. No more Indian Territory. But another thing happened. They had to define the boundaries of the reservation. The southern boundaries defined by the treaty is Fort Defiance. Therefore, Window Rock and San Benito were not within the boundaries of the reservation. Article 9 of the treaty has a very important provision. The Navajos surrender and cede all right and title to everything else outside the boundaries of the reservation, which means San Benito was ceded to the United States government to create the treaty reservation. Next slide. This is one of the only pictures recently discovered about a year ago of the actual treaty party. You see Barboncito here, Manuelito here. My theory is that's Sherman right there. He liked to pose sideways, rocking his little tie and his hat. And that shows you the group of people who are dealing to decide the shape of the reservation. Next slide. This is what the current Navajo Nation looks like. And if you know anything about the land history, it expanded significantly from the original treaty reservation. This rectangle that says 1868, that was the only area created by the treaty. But of course, people coming back from Pelde and people who never went to Bosque Redondo lived where they were from. Notice 1880, just below the 1868 rectangle. That is an executive order addition which included St. Michael's, Window Rock, but it is north of San Benito. San Benito was never added to the reservation because a senator from New Mexico said, "You are not going to expand the boundary of the reservation in New Mexico." Arizona was like, "Yeah, sure, fine, whatever, we're okay with that." Notice the vast majority of expansion was on the Arizona side. So that is why we have the Eastern Navajo Agency today, which is by definition checkerboarded, because Senator Chavez in the 1930s resisted the expansion of the reservation. So San Benito is fee land off the reservation, literally on the border of the Navajo reservation. Therefore, it can function under state law, not Navajo law. Next slide. These are, of course, people who went to see Ulysses S. Grant, the other famous general of the Civil War. Manuelito, Juanita, Ganado Mucho. You see Jesus Arvizo hanging around on the right side, their interpreter. And these people with agency went to D.C. and said, we need to have the reservation expanded. And yet it was not complete. Next slide. This is what the Eastern Navajo Agency looks like. This is not a jurisdictional boundary. This is a BIA administrative boundary. Notice that little white hole. I call it a donut hole. You can call it whatever kind of hole you want. That is Gallup, New Mexico. Next slide. This is what Navajo jurisdiction looks like from lawyers' perspective. Swiss cheese. Because parcel next to parcel next to parcel, every half mile when you go from Yatahé to Window Rock is New Mexico, Navajo, New Mexico, Navajo, New Mexico. Next slide. You may know this place. Admit it, it's all right. That is not my car, I swear. This is, of course, sagebrush. Not Shalimar, but sagebrush. Operating notoriously on the road between Yatahé and Window Rock, completely surrounded by Navajo land. And yet, obviously, they are serving alcohol, which is illegal on the Navajo Nation except for casinos. How can they do that? Because it is not within the nation's jurisdiction. Right next door, across the fence, is in the nation's jurisdiction, but not sagebrush. Because of the history from the treaty to Senator Chavez to the eastern checkerboard area. Next slide. This place, honk honk, trying to get from 2nd Street north or south, the single train, the double train, or the legendary and rare triple train blocking your way. Gallup is a railroad town because Congress gave the railroad land, which they then sold off to non-Indians. Ergo, it exists completely surrounded by Navajo land, but where anything goes. If you've ever been in Gallup at 1 o'clock in the morning, you know what I'm talking about. But all because of the history and law of land, tenure, and jurisdiction. Next one. This is what Gallup area looks like from a jurisdictional perspective. This is Gallup, a big hole of whiteness. Orange is Navajo land. So you can see it is completely surrounded and yet functions independent of any regulation of the Navajo Nation. How much tax money does the Navajo Nation get from Gallup? Zero. Nazbas Aden, nothing. Next slide. Here's a place you may know, Fort Wingate High School, also in the Eastern Navajo Agency. Congress set it aside as an Indian school, separated it out from the old Army Depot. There was a case in the New Mexico Supreme Court 5 years ago as to who has criminal jurisdiction over this school. Answer, the state. A DA in Gallup can have the sheriff show up in this school and arrest Navajo children whenever they want and prosecute them in Gallup under state law whenever they want. Because it is considered state land not Navajo land, even though the board of the school is elected under Navajo Nation law. Next slide. Now you may know this one. This one is facing south, interestingly enough, going north on Highway 491. If you've ever been to a movie in Gallup at Allen Theaters, the delightful Red Rock 10, the less delightful Aztec 5, they have this as a preview. The screen is dark and then it says, "You're not going very far. You've only had a few." And these lights come on behind you. And what do they say? No jurisdictional boundaries. It says right there, nowhere to run, nowhere to hide, no boundaries. What boundaries are they talking about? Between the Navajo Nation and the state. That is exactly what they are referring to. They are talking about the DWI task force where the Navajo Nation, right here, McKinley County, the state police, Rama Navajo, who has their own police, have engaged in cross-commission agreements so they can function anywhere, either on Navajo or in the state. Because up until this time, and there's case law about the city of Farmington, our good friends in Farmington, where Navajos were leaving city limits, the city of Farmington police turned their lights on, the Navajo booked it onto the reservation. There is a natural landmark between the reservation and Farmington called the Hogback, and everybody knew that. And everybody knew as long as you got over on the other side of the Hogback, you were outside state jurisdiction. So the city of Farmington continued into the reservation, arrested someone, took them back into Farmington, and purported to prosecute them. Answer, sorry, can't do it. Why? Even the state Supreme Court of New Mexico said that is a violation of Navajo sovereignty to go onto the reservation, arrest a Navajo, and take them back, even for an off-reservation pursuit, what we call hot pursuit. Now, from a sovereignty perspective, that sounds pretty good. There is a boundary. It exists. You, state, cannot go beyond it. But as a public safety matter, is it also a good idea? Because it may be that person going from Farmington onto the nation, or Gallup, the invisible mile marker 10, which is the reservation boundary on Highway 491, may actually be a dangerous person and may actually be driving a guided missile onto Navajo land. So the Law and Order Committee of the Navajo Nation Council decided we want to do cross-commission agreements where you will respect our sovereignty, but you can act as Navajo law enforcement. So when you go to the movies and see that particular preview, that is what they are attempting to communicate. Because the cross-commission agreement says you can follow someone onto the reservation, you can stop them. If they have committed a crime, you can take them back into state jurisdiction. The nation has waived its extradition law for this purpose. Next slide. Of course, we have here the Navajo Nation Police. Next. Arizona Highway Patrol, McKinley County Sheriffs. Interestingly enough, the Arizona Highway Patrol has a substation in Kayenta. It is present on the Navajo reservation. And so non-Indian police officers are patrolling state roads, by the way, which the nation has granted rights of ways to, on the reservation every day. We have trained these officers about tribal sovereignty. We have trained these officers to receive cross-commission cards on condition of passing a test, showing their understanding of tribal sovereignty. So when they stop a Navajo, they are acting as a Navajo officer, not as a state officer. Because on the reservation, they simply have no criminal jurisdiction at all as an Arizona Highway Patrol, as long as the person is Indian. Next slide. What about this thing? You may not think about this thing very much until you have to enroll a child and then you walk to the metal shack in Window Rock next to the president's office and try to figure out the bureaucracy of what you need to do to get your child enrolled. This is, of course, a certificate of Navajo Indian blood. It's lime green. You can't really tell. I don't know why. My theory is that someone back in 1975 bought 6,000 reams of lime green paper, and they're still working through those reams of paper, because I have no idea why it's lime green, but it is. And of course, what is the purpose of this document? Who created this document? We use this document to show Navajo tribal membership, but it in fact is a federal document created by the Bureau of Indian Affairs, and our census office, or the official Office of Vital Records, issues this document pursuant to a 638 contract with the BIA. We do not have to use this document for tribal identification. In fact, Vital Records issues a photo ID card as an alternative. Now, this is free. The card's $18. If you lose this one, you just go back in and they print it off on a Word file. This is the most counterfeitable document in the history of the world, as long as you have lime green paper. Right? Next. This is what the document is about. I didn't draw this, by the way. This is an actual drawing from a BIA training document issued by the Phoenix area office in 1984 called Tribal Enrollment. And it's fascinating because they drew these cutesy little pictures to try to explain things. What are they trying to communicate here? Well, Dad is apparently a full-blood. Mom is only Indian from her knees down to her feet. So the child is apparently only Indian from the belly button down to the feet. So you understand it now? Next. This is what you have to work with. This is an adaptation of a chart in there. The Pasquayaki actually created this. This is on their website. This is how you calculate blood quantum. You need to have a PhD in math to really figure this out. Now, what is that little gray shaded area? That means you are less than 1/4 and cannot be enrolled at Pasquayaki. By the way, what is the Navajo Nation enrollment? 1/4. Plus no dual enrollment. Plus you have to have a parent that is also enrolled. So we have adopted this system from the BIA. We did not have a citizenship definition until 1953. And we haven't changed it since 1953. So it has been 1/4 since 1953, but based on this construct. Next. Let's talk about the tribal government. Now it's interesting. I sometimes get updates from Facebook, as some of you may have as well. I don't subscribe to some of the more extreme Facebook groups about Navajo politics, but people who are younger, millennials, in my office do, and so they will forward me stuff. I call it the Jeanette News. And it's less important whether it's true, and more important as to what people believe is true, right? Fake news, there's no monopoly on fake news. Let's just be honest about that. So there was a Facebook post about how supposedly President Wingate issued an executive order that required everybody to call it a Navajo taco and not an Indian taco. This was a Facebook post. And I thought it was satire. I thought it was the Cochin News. Andrew was around here. I thought it was satire. But when you looked at the comments, people took it seriously. People literally thought that President Wingate had issued an executive order banning an Indian taco. There's one minor problem. He can't do that. He has no legal authority to issue an executive order of that nature. But it goes to show to me the disconnect in understanding of how this government actually works and how people think it works. Because we have a three-branch government that only originates in 1989, for reasons that you are aware. Before then, there was no executive branch and legislative branch. The courts had been created in 1959. They had been federal courts. But the president's executive order authority is only to implement council statutes. So he can only issue an executive order if council says you cannot call it an Indian taco. You can only call it a Navajo taco. But comment after comment after comment raged against this action of President Wingate as if he could actually do that. And I think, to me, it is a disconnect in understanding how the law actually works. Next slide. This is, of course, very unique for Navajo Nation, an actual drawing in our statutes. The Naltsos do Tiji, if you will, the Blue Book. This is Title I, the fundamental laws of the Dine statute, the Nebebena. And so the modern government, no constitution, 1989, the council passed a statute saying you have to apply the fundamental laws of the Dine, but did not say how you're supposed to do that. So who is left to decide how you integrate statutes with court cases? Next slide. The courts. Because one thing you need to know about the law is the law will tell you who you can vote for in any election. Now, this is just an example. Of course, we know this was about 4 years ago. In reality, every candidate who has made it through the Navajo primary has been attacked by somebody in the courts, under the court system, saying they are ineligible. This is, of course, the most high-profile one, where the courts actually disqualified him. You may remember his name, Chris Descini. But what happened after the courts did that? There was a referendum sponsored by the council to change a law they had passed to say the people shall decide who is fluent. Now, you may agree or disagree with that. The Navajos in the room are the ones who are empowered to do that. I'm not here to tell you what's right or wrong, but I will tell you, understanding how the system works, empowering yourself to know what's true and what isn't true. So when you read, heaven forfend, the Gallup Independent, the truth well told, as I've said, there's two things wrong with that. The ultimate Jeanette news, I don't know if there's any reporters from the Gallup Independent here, not you, come at it with knowledge and power to know what's true and what isn't true. When you read the Navajo Times, you know, it's kind of like Tommy Lee Jones in Men in Black when he wanted to find out what was really going on. He read the tabloids, right? Alien abduction. Oh, okay, that's, you know. You read the Navajo Times, at least I do, to know more what people are thinking about the law than what the law actually is. Now, I wish that wasn't true. I wish that there was accurate reporting, but it shows that this is what's important. If the newspapers, if the press, if Facebook aren't going to do that, you need to do that. Lawyers should not have a monopoly on legal knowledge. I didn't say that as an official statement of DOJ. Lawyers should not have a monopoly on legal knowledge. Everyone should understand it, whatever your position is on these issues. Because when you understand that, you can change it. Because you can complain about it and be wrong as to how it functions, and that's not going to get you anywhere. You can complain about it knowing its assumptions, its limits, its language, its conventions, and then you can empower yourself to do something about it. Am I getting the cutty-cutty? Oh, I have 1 minute. I want to acknowledge my daughter, by the way, Tazba. She is TDB Bicheke. Yeah, there you go. And this is probably her last official act as TDB princess. She will have to give up that shiny crown in 4 days to the next one. And my son, Bahi, is there. He's probably watching Fortnite videos as I speak. But anyway, this is the point. This is why I said, okay, I'll do it, even though I'm a non-Indian, even though I'm DOJ. DOJ equals DOA. I've heard it on Facebook. Fake news. But because despite those limits on what I can say, what you should do, because that's not my place, I want you to know what you can do. And that means empowering yourself to understand the system. Because everything that happens on the ground every day is affected by the system, whether you want to believe it or not. That 6% that goes to the tribe at churches versus the 8% that goes to McKinley County has historical and legal reasons why that is. And knowing that and understanding it, I think means in the next 150 years from the treaty going forward, you can empower yourselves. Thank you.